I was declared dead for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. That number is burned into my memory because the doctor said it twice, like he didn't believe it himself. 4 minutes without a heartbeat. 4 minutes without breath. 4 minutes where, according to everything I was taught, there should have been nothing. My name is Malik Haddad. I'm a Muslim. I was raised Muslim. I prayed as a child, drifted as a teenager, came back to it in my 20s in a quiet, practical way. I believed in God, judgment, mercy. I didn't question the framework. I didn't feel the need to. Faith was something steady in the background, not something dramatic. When I woke up, the first thing I said was a name I had never spoken in prayer. It came out of my mouth before I understood what I was doing. Not loud, not emotional, just a name, like you say when you recognize someone in a crowd. The nurse froze. She asked me who I was talking to. I didn't answer. I was still trying to understand how my chest hurt and didn't hurt at the same time. I didn't feel holy. I didn't feel chosen. I felt exposed, like something private had happened and I hadn't agreed to share it. What stays with me isn't fear. It's the calm. The kind of calm that doesn't ask permission. The kind that makes you realize how loud your life has always been. I didn't see flames. I didn't see gates. I didn't see what movies show. I saw something much harder to explain because it didn't feel symbolic. It felt literal. I'm not telling this because I want to convince you of anything. I'm telling it because I came back carrying something I didn't go there with. And it hasn't let me go since. Before that day, my life was small and ordinary in the best way. I worked long hours at a logistics company, mostly sitting, mostly tired. I drank too much coffee and skipped meals without noticing. My days blended together, and I liked that. Predictable meant safe. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment near a busy road. At night, the sound of cars helped me sleep. Silence made my thoughts too loud. On weekends, I visited my parents or stayed home scrolling on my phone, half watching things I wouldn't remember. My faith existed, but it didn't interfere. I fasted during Ramadan. I avoided certain foods. I prayed when I remembered. I assumed intention mattered more than precision. God was understanding. That was my quiet assumption. I wasn't reckless. I didn't think I was wasting my life. I told myself I had time. Time to be better. Time to be more serious. Time to fix things that felt slightly off, but not urgent enough to address. I remember the morning clearly because nothing felt different. I woke up late, rushed through a shower, skipped breakfast. I argued with myself about going to the gym and didn't go. I sent a voice message to my sister about something unimportant and promised I'd call her properly later. Later felt guaranteed. At work, I laughed with a coworker about a mistake that wasn't really funny. I checked the time too often. I felt a dull pressure in my chest around noon and ignored it. I told myself it was stress, or coffee, or nothing. Nothing important ever starts as something important. That's the part no one warns you about. The moment my body failed was quiet. No crash. No fall. No dramatic pain. I was standing by the printer when the room tilted slightly, like a camera angle shifting. My legs felt wrong, like they were a step behind my thoughts. I remember thinking I should sit down. I didn't get the chance. There was a sharp pressure in my chest, then a sudden absence of it, like something had been unplugged. My vision narrowed, not into darkness, but into focus. Sound stretched and then snapped away. I didn't feel panic. That's what surprises me most. I felt confusion, brief and curious. Then nothing physical made sense anymore. I was aware that I was falling, but I didn't experience the impact. 1 second I was moving downward, the next I was still. Not lying down, not standing, just present. I knew my body was somewhere behind me before I saw it. That knowledge came first. When I turned, it was like turning a thought, not a head. I saw myself on the floor, surrounded by shoes and chair legs. Someone was shouting my name, but it sounded far away, distorted, like it was passing through water. There was no pain in watching it. No attachment. The body looked familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, like an object you've owned for years but never really examined. Time didn't behave normally. Events didn't follow each other. They existed side by side. I could see people rushing toward me and also feel a pull in another direction, gentle but firm. I didn't think, I'm dying. That concept didn't come. What came was a certainty that something irreversible had already happened, and then the world I knew lost its weight. The distance between me and my body kept increasing, even though I wasn't moving in any direction I could describe. It wasn't floating. It wasn't rising. It was more like the body was becoming less relevant, fading in priority rather than space. Sound disappeared completely. Not silence, absence. Like sound was never a thing to begin with. What replaced it wasn't emptiness. It was awareness. Clean, sharp awareness without effort. I understood things instantly without thinking them through. I knew I was not breathing and didn't need to. I knew the body on the floor was finished, at least for now. I knew fear belonged to muscles and nerves, not to whatever I was now. There was no tunnel, no spinning, no flash of memories. Just a sudden clarity that felt almost uncomfortable in how honest it was. I couldn't hide from myself anymore. There was no internal noise to soften things. I became aware of a presence behind me before I turned toward it. Not visually at first. It was like standing near someone in a dark room and knowing exactly where they are without seeing them. The presence didn't rush me. It didn't pull. It waited. Waiting felt intentional, like I was being given space to notice what was happening rather than being forced through it. When I turned, the environment changed. Not dramatically, subtly. The sense of location dissolved. There were no walls, no ground, no sky. But there was depth. Layers. Like meaning had distance. I didn't think about religion. I didn't think about rules or consequences. I didn't even think about my family. All of that felt far away, like concepts from another life. What mattered was that I was fully awake for the first time. More awake than I had ever been while alive. And whatever was near me knew that. I didn't see a face right away. I felt recognition before sight, and that recognition unsettled me. Not because it was frightening, but because it was intimate. Like being known without introduction. When I did perceive him, it wasn't with eyes. It was closer to understanding shape through meaning. Still, there was a form. Human enough to be familiar. Different enough that I couldn't mistake it for imagination. He didn't announce himself. He didn't say a name. He didn't need to. The calm intensified, not soothing, but steady. The kind of calm that makes resistance feel pointless. I became aware that I had been bracing myself my entire life without realizing it. There was no judgment in his presence. That surprised me. I expected evaluation, a sense of weighing. Instead, there was attention. Complete, undivided attention. I tried to speak. I didn't use words. The intention to speak was enough. I wanted to ask where I was. I wanted to ask why this was happening. Before any question formed fully, I understood that answers weren't going to come the way I expected. He didn't move closer, yet he was suddenly everywhere. Not physically surrounding me, but filling the space of awareness. It felt like standing in direct sunlight after years indoors. Not painful, but impossible to ignore. I realized then that this encounter wasn't about information. It was about exposure. Everything I thought was private felt visible, not just actions, but motivations. Excuses. Half-truths I had accepted without challenge. Still, there was no rejection. No disappointment. Just truth, standing there without decoration. That was when the first belief I carried began to crack. I had always believed sincerity was enough. That if my intentions were mostly good, the details didn't matter. That God cared more about direction than precision. That belief didn't survive in his presence. Not because I was accused of being wrong, but because the belief itself felt thin, incomplete, like a sentence missing its center. I became aware of how often I had used good intentions to avoid change. How often I delayed growth by calling it patience. How often comfort disguised itself as faith. This wasn't shown to me as a list of failures. It appeared as contrast. What I claimed to value versus what I actually gave my attention to. What I said mattered versus what shaped my days. I understood then that belief isn't something you declare. It's something you move toward or away from constantly, even in small, forgettable choices. There was a moment where I expected correction to feel humiliating. It didn't. It felt clarifying, like finally being told the rules of a game I'd been playing blind. I realized I had treated truth like something flexible, something that could adapt to my comfort. Here, truth didn't bend. It didn't need to. It simply was. He didn't tell me I was wrong to be who I was, but he made it impossible for me to pretend I didn't know where I had been drifting. The most unsettling part wasn't realizing I was mistaken. It was realizing I had known, on some level, the entire time. And that awareness opened into something else. Not a lesson, a vision. Next, the scene shifted without warning. One moment I was aware of him. The next I was standing in a wide open space that felt endless but not empty. The ground beneath me was solid, dark, smooth. It reflected no light. In front of me were two paths. Not roads, not doors, directions. Each one felt real before it looked real. One path was narrow, not threatening, just exposed. There was no railing, no markers, no promise of comfort. It didn't glow. It didn't invite. It simply existed, firm and honest. Walking it felt like commitment before understanding. The other path was wide and soft. The surface looked forgiving, almost warm. It curved gently, disappearing into something pleasant-looking. I couldn't see where it ended, but I felt reassured by that. It asked nothing of me except movement. No one told me which to take. No voice explained consequences. The choice sat in my chest like weight. I noticed something strange. The wide path felt familiar. It carried the same energy as my daily life had. Busy, reasonable, full of justifications. The narrow path felt quiet in a way that made me uncomfortable. Like it would force me to pay attention. I didn't step onto either. I just stood there, understanding that standing still was also a choice. I sensed that many people walked the wide path without realizing it was a path at all. It blended so well with standing still that it felt like neutrality. The narrow one required a decision that couldn't be hidden behind habit. There was no fear attached to either option, just honesty. Before I could move, the scene folded inward, like it had done its job simply by being seen. I found myself inside a place that felt like rest. Comfortable seating, warm light, familiar sounds. It reminded me of homes I had visited, spaces designed to make you stay longer than you planned. People were there, many of them. They looked calm, content, engaged in small conversations. Some were smiling, some were distracted. No one seemed distressed. At first, it felt reassuring. This looked like safety, like arrival. Then I noticed something subtle. No one was really listening to anyone else. Words were exchanged, but nothing landed. Laughter existed, but it didn't connect. It echoed and vanished. I realized no one was moving forward. Everyone was settled, perfectly arranged, as if the room itself encouraged stillness. Comfort without growth. Peace without depth. I sensed that time didn't pass here. Not because it was eternal, but because nothing changed. The environment rewarded staying exactly as you were. I saw versions of myself among them. Not exact copies, but familiar postures. The way I sat when I avoided difficult thoughts. The way I smiled to signal everything was fine. The safety here wasn't false because it was dangerous. It was false because it was sufficient. It asked nothing more and offered nothing deeper. I understood that many people mistake this feeling for fulfillment. That relief can feel like truth when you've been tired long enough. As I became aware of this, the warmth faded slightly. Not into cold, into neutrality. The room didn't disappear. It simply stopped holding me. The next place was stark. No decoration, no comfort, just clarity. I became aware of layers within myself, laid out without judgment. What I presented to the world, what I believed about myself, what actually guided my actions. The outer layer looked fine, responsible, moral, reasonable. It matched how others saw me. That layer had always protected me. Beneath it was something quieter, a constant negotiation, a habit of choosing what felt manageable over what felt true. Not out of malice, but out of fatigue. I saw how often I had confused being acceptable with being aligned. How easily I settled for looking right instead of being honest. There was no accusation in seeing this, just precision. I understood that inner truth doesn't announce itself loudly. It waits. It becomes harder to hear the longer it's ignored, not because it weakens, but because everything else gets louder. What unsettled me was realizing how convincing appearances can be. How easy it is to build a life that looks solid while slowly hollowing out. In this place, nothing could be hidden by effort. Only what was real remained visible. I sensed that this was not unique to me, that everyone carries this contrast. The difference is whether they ever stop long enough to see it. The awareness didn't crush me. It steadied me. And then that steady pressure turned into something else. Not force. Urgency. Next, the urgency didn't feel like fear. It felt like standing at the edge of something that was already moving. Like time wasn't running out, but moving on without asking if I was ready. I became aware of how limited attention is. Not time itself, but attention. How few moments in a life are actually lived awake. How many are spent repeating, avoiding, waiting. I sense that delay has weight. That postponement isn't neutral. It shapes direction quietly, the same way habit does. No one told me I was late, but I understood that later is not an open space. It narrows. There was a pressure in my chest again, not physical, but familiar. The same feeling I used to ignore when something mattered, and I chose comfort instead. Here, that pressure couldn't be dismissed. I saw moments from my life, not as memories, but as opportunities. Small ones. Conversations I rushed. Truths I softened. Decisions I deferred because they felt inconvenient. None of them were dramatic. That was the point. I understood that urgency doesn't come from disaster. It comes from clarity, from seeing how little is required to change direction and how rarely it's taken. There was no threat attached to this awareness. No countdown. Just a sense that movement mattered more than intention. The calm remained, but it was no longer passive. It carried expectation. Not demand. Expectation. Before I could settle into that understanding, something shifted sharply. The clarity fractured, and I felt weight again. The return was violent compared to everything else. Not painful at first, just overwhelming. Sensation rushed in all at once, unfiltered. Sound slammed into me. Voices, alarms, movement. My chest burned like it had been forced open. I tried to inhale and couldn't. Then I did, and it hurt. Confusion followed. Heavy, disorienting confusion. I knew where I had been, but I couldn't locate it anymore. Like waking from a dream that refuses to stay still. I felt resistance. Not from my body, but from myself. A strong sense that I didn't want to be back yet. That something was unfinished. My hands felt enormous. My mouth dry. My heartbeat loud and uneven. Every sensation demanded attention at once, and I didn't have the capacity to meet it. Someone was calling my name. I recognized it as mine, but it sounded borrowed. When I opened my eyes, the light was too bright. The room felt cramped, wrong, like trying to fit into clothes that no longer matched your shape. I wanted to say something important. I didn't know how to translate it. Words felt clumsy, insufficient. That's when the name slipped out of me. Unplanned, unfiltered. The room reacted. I didn't. I was too busy realizing that I had brought something back with me. Not a message. A weight. A quiet, steady knowing that wouldn't let me pretend nothing had happened. I don't expect you to believe this. I'm not sure I would have, if I were listening instead of speaking. I'm still a Muslim. That didn't disappear, but something shifted underneath the labels. Something deeper than identity or tradition. What changed me wasn't what I saw. It was how clearly I saw myself when nothing could be justified or explained away. Since coming back, life looks the same. Same streets, same work, same people, but it doesn't feel neutral anymore. Every choice feels slightly louder. I don't feel fear walking through my days. I feel responsibility, not the heavy kind, the precise kind. I'm more aware of when I'm numbing myself, more aware of when I'm choosing ease over honesty. Not perfectly, just clearly. I don't think experiences like this are rare. I think awareness is. If there's anything I carried back, it's this. Truth isn't hidden. It's ignored. Comfort isn't evil. It's convincing. And time doesn't rush, but it doesn't wait. I didn't come back with answers about everything. I came back unable to pretend I don't notice what matters. If this unsettles you, that's okay. It unsettled me too. Some things aren't meant to scare you. They're meant to wake you up quietly.